From a long time on shift with Motordrift, we have been doing serious podcasts. Podcasts in which we got to learn something new every week. So I thought of giving you all and myself a change by conversating with some automotive enthusiasts just like you and me. Thus, today we have with us Ryan and Scene from the Drunk Boys Basement podcast. It's one of the most popular podcasts in Salt Lake City. So we have tried to break down their journey with cars on this episode of Shift with Motor Drift. So welcome Ryan and Scene. Glad to have you on the podcast.
Hi, how are you?
Happy to be here. Hey.
Yeah, I'm doing great, guys. So and it's my first time, like actually having two guests at a time.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Oh.
we're a dual person podcast. So
Yeah.
you get both of us at the same time.
Yeah. So my first question is, when did you start to develop interest in cars? Ryan, you go first.
Oh boy. So initially I never had any passion toward cars. And then so in the United States, when you turn 16, you can get your license. And when I was 15, my dad and I started looking for a car, and I didn't really know what kind of car I wanted. But as we started looking more and more, I figured out the car, like my dream car at the time was a Mitsubishi Evolution. So an Evo 10, 2010 or newer. But obviously for a 16-year-old, that was like way too much money, and insurance is really expensive. And it was just not like, I didn't know anything about it. And at the time, my dad didn't either. And so we were kind of both under the assumption that it wouldn't be a good idea. So we settled for a base Lancer. So it was just a generic 2010 Lancer. And I still have that car. And it's the car that I learned everything on, like everything. And
Except for shifting.
Yeah, it's an automatic. So let's just relax here. Right? It is an automatic, but at the time I didn't know how to drive stick. So that was another reason. Is it was supposed to be a car that got me to point A and B as a student. And it was one of those things where I kind of started wanting more. And because I wanted more, I started learning more about like cars and what I could do to the car I had. And honestly, it kind of snowballed, like thinking back to when I was a lot younger. It was just something that I didn't know I wanted. And then I started doing it and I figured out I wanted. And it just turned into this myriad of passion and stuff that I really thoroughly enjoy. I mean, there are times where I absolutely hate all the cars that I own, but at the time, I mean, I like I said, I still have it. I've done absolutely everything I could possibly do to that car, and I just can't find myself to get rid of it. And that's been like something that I'm really passionate about, is how much time and effort I spent on that car. And yeah, it's just really snowballed into what I do now with all of my cars, and how much of an influence they have on my life.
Great story, man. Now, Scene, you.
Oh man,
go.
I feel like I feel like I can't do better than that story. So I mean, I kind of was growing up, I didn't really have any interest in cars. But it was interesting because a lot of my love for cars started when I was playing like the PlayStation 2, and I played Need for Speed. And it was kind of interesting, like seeing what you could do with the cars in that game. I mean, you couldn't do any engine modifications. Well, I mean, a little bit, but per se. And so by the time I was 16 and finally got my driver's license, I remember my very first car was actually something that was given to me as a Ford Escape, or not a Ford Escape, the Escort. That's what it was.
Yeah, it was the Escort, the red Escort.
It was a Ford Escort, but it was like, it was gutless, it was automatic, and something about it just, it didn't really enthuse me a whole lot, and I wanted something more out of my car. But of course, with this, with me having to share this with another family member of mine, I couldn't really do much to it. So some things happened. The car ended up not being in anyone's possession. It had to go to the junkyard. And thus started my adventure to find something that's I kind of did I want a manual in the beginning, or did I not even care? I don't
think you really cared that much. I think that you Yeah.
He knows a lot of it because he had to go through this.
Yeah. We looked for a long time for a car that he liked.
So after that car was gone, I was dead set on getting something more of a sporty car that I could work on and actually start like modifying it. And I had Ryan driving me to the dealerships like every single week and like what's new, what can I get? Until I finally found my Volkswagen GTI. That was really what really inspired me to start working on cars and start doing modifications. As I started tinkering around with that. So I mean, as far as my inspiration for cars, I would say it's that Volkswagen GTI. That's about all I got.
Yeah, that was kind of like a family car almost, because he went through a lot with that car, and I saw a lot of the things he went through with it. So it has a special place in both of our hearts for sure.
Great, man. Every car has a story with it.
Yeah.
Now, what's the car culture at the place you live in? Like, are there exotics all around, or like, is there a tuning culture or something like that?
I got something I could say.
Okay, I'll get mine out, and then you can do yours.
All
Right. There is a tuning culture where we live. There is an exotic culture as well. It's dependent upon, so it's not just any one. From what I've noticed here in Utah, it's not the entire state is into one thing. There's different parts of the state that are into different types of cars. So where we live, closer to like the ski resorts and stuff like that, there are more exotic cars and higher end, McLarens and Mercedes and top class BMWs and stuff like that. But then as you get more into Salt Lake proper, like downtown area, there's a lot more tuning culture down there with Subarus, Evos, Supras occasionally. So it's really just a mixed bag of things, but I'll defer to Sean for the rest of that.
Well, I was just gonna say, we live in Utah where there's snow for like, well, actually, we can't say the snow anymore because whatever's going on. There's
snow for a lot. I would say, on a bad year, probably 8 months out of the year, there's snow.
So like everywhere you look in the culture, it's all Subarus.
That's a better, yeah, Sean's right. So the real, like, if you want to really get into like the microculture of Utah, Subarus everywhere. STIs, WRXs, bug eyes, even the old STs, like the right-hand drive ones. I've seen some of those. Lots of all-wheel drive cars. So Evos and Subarus, like Mitsubishis in general, and then Subarus are like the two biggest manufacturers in Utah. And then you get all of the, obviously, the exotic car guys, and then the Honda guys and whatever else.
I saw that Stradman lives in Utah, so I thought that like people are more about exotics there.
Yes, we have Stradman, and then we've got Ken Block as well. So
is Ken Block in Utah?
Ken Block's in Park City.
Oh,
so he's got all of his toys up at the Hoon factory, and then Stradman. Yep, Hoonicon. Yep. And
love that car.
So yeah, he's got that, and his Traxxas, his Ford Ranger Traxxas is down at one of the detail shops in Salt Lake here. So I've seen that. But yeah, we've got two of the biggest icons in Salt Lake and the car community that I know of are Stradman and Ken Block.
Yeah, and they have been like inspiration to many car enthusiasts around the world.
Yeah, they have massive followings. So it's kind of endearing to know that they're in our backyard here.
Yeah, and Stradman owns the Bugatti Veyrons, and it's my dream car. So like I kind of have that connection with him. That this dude owns my dream car.
That's why. So, what makes the Veyron your dream car?
It was the car on which I started my journey with. Like, it's not like I got my hands on it, but I think I was in 6th grade, and like once I was having a conversation with my friend, like which is the fastest car in the world. So I took the Thrust SEC, and I did not know at that time that like it's not a road legal car. It's a car that like just created a world record in 1997. It's the car that broke the land speed record. So me being the cool kid, I just like took it up, and I was like, dude, I will like take the Thrust SEC and go faster than the speed of sound. And then he was like, bro, you can't take it because it's not road legal. So I was like, well, well, what's the fastest car on road? He was like, you got to buy the Bugatti Veyron. And I, like that was the first time I heard the name. And, like
Uh-huh.
from that day on, I just went on, Googled it and saw all the records it had created. And yeah, like from that day, like my car journey really started. Before that, all I used to do was, like scrap, like take pictures out of car and just paste it in my diary or my scrapbook. That's all I
Yeah.
used to do. I did not
Yeah.
knew the manufacturer's name, the engine specifications, nothing. After the
Right.
Veyron, it all started. So, like it all started with the
Wow.
Veyron, and that's why I have a connection with it.
It's a beautiful car. I mean, it's different. I mean, inside of it looks like a spaceship, but
Exactly.
it's but it's I mean, you get up to that tier of car with the McLaren, Bugatti,
Mm,
even Rolls Royce. I mean, a lot of that's hand built. I mean, literally no
yeah,
manufacturing assembly line. It's all hand built, hand painted, hand stitched. Everything's hand done.
exactly. And when like people start questioning that, dude, why the Veyron costs $1 million? Like, can't it be cheaper? I'm like, dude, the number of hours that went into creating that car, you don't have an idea about. So like, it's and like it's probably worth millions of dollars and like worth buying for the ones who can afford it.
Yeah,
And and
absolutely.
like I have noticed a thing that people who can't buy these cars are the most loud about it.
Yep, absolutely. Well,
Exactly.
that's I mean, it's the same to be said for like you asked the question of why doesn't Lamborghini have commercials, and it's well because Lamborghini owners don't watch TV. They're
Hmm.
they're grinding away making money so they can
Hmm.
afford their Lamborghini.
Hmm. Exactly. Now, Ryan, how was your experience at General Motors Automotive Service Educational Program? I mean, I expanded it a
Oh
bit.
boy, yeah, that's yeah. Uh, my college career started out here locally in Salt Lake, and initially, I wanted to turn my passion into a career, which is everyone's dream at one point.
Hmm.
Um, and so I went to a university here where they specialize in automotive serve tech, which is the automotive service technician program, where you basically get certified, you learn about the program that you're in. So mine was General Motors, so Ford, Chrysler, or not Chrysler, God, not Chrysler, or Ford, General Motors, Chevy, GMC, God, I'm all over the place. Chevy and GMC predominantly. So I spent a lot of time learning automotive, like the automotive trade on General Motors cars. Um, One of the things that I found out shortly through my program, and it was a very in-depth program, how to deal with wire issues and engine malfunctions, all sorts of the whole encompassing thing of how to work on cars.
Hmm.
And one of the things that they required was that I work at a dealership under any capacity. I could be a lube technician, I could be a service advisor or a service writer. It didn't matter. Um, and so I got a job at General Motors, a Chevy dealership in Salt Lake for a while, 6 months or so. But one of the things that I learned, not only through that short stint to that job, but throughout my entire college career, was that as much as I wanted to turn my passion into a career, I wanted to keep it more of a passion. I found more so that I enjoyed working on my car
Hmm.
and not other people's cars. And what that turned into was I started to detest working on my own cars. And it was really kind of a reverse function of it being a passion and it not become and becoming something that I no longer wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I did learn a lot through the program. I mean, I'm not saying that it was a total waste of my time. I would have
Hmm.
graduated a lot sooner if I didn't take that program, but uh, I did learn a lot about the automotive industry and what it takes to work on cars and
Hmm.
all of the different things that could go wrong with cars. But I realized pretty quickly in that it was something that I'd rather keep a passion than a job. And the job that I'd rather have in that industry would be something along the lines of a tuning shop or
Hmm.
something that was more custom catered to certain people rather than just working on someone's car that had a TPMS light on or an engine light on. I'd rather be more in depth and think and learn and build something that someone else is proud of rather than doing something that's just kind of required of me. And so because it turned into something that really negated my passion, I stopped doing it.
Hmm.
I dropped out of that program probably 9 months into it, and I just started pursuing a career or an education business.
Hmm.
Um, knowing that I was going to keep that passion for cars kind of on the side and something that I can do on the weekends with my buddies rather than, I mean, it'd be great to make money doing it, but I'd rather do it because I want to do it because I like doing it rather than feeling like I have to do it or I'm forced to do it. And that's what really ruined the passion for me for a while is I felt like I had to do it and it turned into something that I just didn't want to do anymore.
Understandable, man. Yeah, like you got to learn something, but yeah, ultimately it's over your passion. Like,
yeah. And that's, I mean, I think that can be said for just about anything. I think that once it becomes a job, it's no longer a passion. And when you start running out of excuses as to why you're doing it and it's turning into something that you're just having to do rather than wanting to do it, then it's no longer a passion. It's something that you're just doing to do.
yeah.
And it really did negate my love for cars for a while, because as much of a pain in the ass as some of my cars can be, it's something that I love to do. I love to work on cars. I love to think about cars, look at cars, read about cars. But again, when I encompass my education about it, I'm glad that I learned something about it, but I'm also really glad that I didn't pursue that career path.
Yeah. And like it has happened with me as well, like when I just entered college, before that, like I used to be enthusiastic about cars and defense stuff, basically, like missiles and all. Okay. This all stuffs. Okay. Like I was just crazy about them, man. But the moment I entered the college, like studies came in and, like everyone was like, dude, become more serious. Like at the end of this 4-year program, you have a job to look up to, this and that. So for the first 2 years, like I was just too much engaged in that college program that I forgot that I had a passion as well. And like 2 years later, when someone asked me, dude, like you check that all new Lamborghini that came out, and I was like, dude, I have no idea. And they started questioning that you were the one, like who can talk about like 24 hours without stopping about cars, like what has happened to you. And like right at that time this pandemic happened, and like it kind of gave me a break. It kind of like gave me a break and a thought, a time to like think about like where I am at life. And then like I just reinvested my passion, like, and just re-entered it. Because even like while I was in college, I started a blog online, but the fire was not within me. Like I had kind of lost it. So I was like, dude, like before I lose this completely, and like I have to like look for something else, I need to like get back into this field. And yeah, like it's been great so far.
And I think I mean, that's great. I think it's kind of a weird blessing in disguise because it allowed not only you, but it honestly probably allowed me as well to kind of realign my passion. I mean, we have pretty cold winters here, and obviously with winter, you can't drive most of the cars that we own. So I use that time as like a lot of self-reflection because, when summer comes and it gets warmer, I can think, okay, well, I'm going to really start getting back into it again.
Yeah.
So I have the grace to be able to realign myself each year. Like if I get tired of it over the summer, I know I have the winter to realign myself and get back into something I love.
Yeah. And I think, that this pandemic, especially, it kind of, like gave everyone a reset, a time to like self-introspect, especially me.
I agree with you.
Because when I was, like before that, I just used to like write blogs. That's all I used to do. But during the last year, in August, I started a YouTube channel. Next month, I started a podcast. And yeah, like the rest is history. And like we are just progressing.
Yeah, good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. Thank you. So, Sean, tell something about your 2001 Mark IV Volkswagen GTI.
Oh goodness, that poor thing.
You gotta preface the fact that you don't own it anymore.
I mean, it is very true. I did end up having to sell it, but that car. I'm trying to think
because we were just talking about this today.
What about how I wish I still had that car? Oh yeah. I was telling Ryan actually earlier today about how like if I hadn't sold that Mark IV Volkswagen, where would it be at this point? Because the only reason I sold it is because I was at that I hate saying it this way, but young enough, I was still terrified of actually working on an engine, but also didn't have the money to go to a shop and be like, hey, please redo this whole thing. Because eventually actually the head gasket finally gave out on the engine. So it's a matter of how much internal damage was done, and as well as how bad of a job would it be to actually replace the head gasket and do all that. Um,
Isn't it funny though, not to interrupt you, but
Right.
how at that point in life, both of us were kind of on that same spectrum, but now it's like, oh, head gasket jobs. Yeah. Couple hours of time. No big deal.
Now I'm at this point where my 1988 Volkswagen Sirocco, we've already broken that thing down to bare block, done the pistons, head
1988.
gasket. 1988. Yeah, that's what I
You
said.
said 1998.
Oh, 1988, whatever I said. Anyway.
Yeah, he's not to speak on behalf of him, but he's still got a project car. Don't get it twisted.
Oh yeah, and I will never leave the European life. Volkswagen, Audi, they're my love of mine. I feel like I gotta say like one awesome thing about that GTI. Is there anything that comes to your mind? I gotta say.
The thing that's funny is growing up, we kind of shared passions together because we've grown up together for years and years and years, and we
all I can really think of is the how many weekends that was stuck in your garage.
Yeah, there was lots of weekends where it was stuck in my garage for small things. I mean, we did small things like paint the calipers, and that was a nightmare.
I was gonna say there was one weekend I had brought it over to Ryan's garage to work on it to paint the calipers. Like I got spoked wheels. I need to make sure my calipers look good. We pull the wheels off. We're getting the calipers done, and we made a mistake and broke. What was it? A brake line?
Well, what we'd done was we pulled the e-brake and it extended the pistons on the rear calipers, and we didn't know at the time you have to get the compression tool to push the piston back in the caliper.
Yeah.
So we couldn't get it over the rotor. And because of that, that was on like a Friday or Saturday. I can't remember, but we didn't know what to do. And it was in my garage for about a week.
Yeah, it had to have been about a week.
All we were doing was just changing the color on the caliper. It wasn't anything invasive, but it turned into a whole weekend of nightmarish. But that's the thing though, is looking back at stuff like that for not only me, but I'm sure Sean, is that issue, that problem caused us to learn a lot by force, but it caused us to learn a lot.
Basically, that car went the Subaru way. Head gasket blew up.
Yep, went out like a true Subaru did.
So true.
Now, like, how did the engine pass away?
What?
How did the engine pass away, Sean?
How did the engine? I still wonder that to this day.
Head gasket failure.
I still wonder that to this day. The thing only had like 130,000 miles on it, but when it finally started giving out, what was it? I just remember, was it an oil change? Yeah, it was during an oil change. I noticed the what is it? The foam that happens. It's been a while.
You have air in the system and it causes bubbling in the oil.
Yeah, the bubbling and the orange fluid. Oh,
you get coolant in the oil and you know it's game over.
And I was sitting there just wanting to cry myself to sleep.
Yeah.
It's probably from all the gear banging I was doing in that car.
Probably just stoplight racing.
Now, Ryan, what is the current scenario of the drift stunts and the show community?
So we've got a pretty large drift community in Salt Lake. And I'm not personally invested in it. I've got a lot of friends that are invested in it because that's a very expensive sport. And you gotta like your car, but not like it enough that you're not afraid to trash it, because you're gonna trash it when you do that kind of stuff. But there's a real equilibrium of all three. I mean, there's speed. We've got a lot of really fast cars in Utah. And there's it's funny you say that. There's actually an event next Saturday. I think it's June 5th, and it's, what is it, StanceCon? No, it's called Import Spring Show Off, ISS.
Yeah, okay, yep. That
Import Spring Show Off is a huge event in Salt Lake every year, the first week of June, and people come from all over. I mean, Arizona, Colorado, California. It's a big event, and that's really where the show and stance cars come out, is for that event. I mean, it's a very large event. For any of you guys listening, it's on Facebook. Import Spring Show Off. It's ISS for short. It's on Google. You can Google it. They have really cool pictures, really cool events that they do. But we have because of that event specifically, we have a very, very large stance and show community in Salt Lake. Because people that will move, from Colorado, California, Arizona, the aforementioned states, will come and live in Salt Lake, and they still have a community of stance cars or show cars or whatever. It's very big, and it perpetuates a community. So there may be kids that weren't super involved in that community, but because of that show specifically, now they're more involved in the community as a whole. There aren't very many meets that go on that are as big as that. There are some, but they're few and far between. Most of the time you'll see some people on Facebook on the local car pages post up an event. You might get 10 or 15 people in a parking lot, but the stance and show community in Utah is very much alive and well. I mean, that I don't think will ever change. And then in the way of the drift community, we've got Salt City Drift. They're a huge group of people that put on events at the local racetrack for a weekend, and you can go camp and watch the drift cars, and you can compete if you have a drift car. It's a lot of fun. So all the communities are really alive and well, and especially as the weather gets warmer, you're starting to see more and more cars on the road, more and more people getting stuck on speed bumps. Like it's great.
So, like, are you personally, like more inclined towards drift cars or stance cars if you had to choose between the two?
I'm on the spectrum of all three, or all two actually. So I've got my Lancer, the one that I mentioned earlier. It's on a full air suspension. So and that was something that I wanted to do since I was like 18. And so that's a complete show car. I mean, it doesn't go very fast. It can't go. It's just really a paperweight at this point. But so that's my stance car. And then my dad and I built a Nissan 300Z that we have that has the capabilities to be a drift car. I don't think I could ever bring myself to drift it, because we spent a lot of time and effort perfecting the car and bringing it back to what it looked like in the 1990s. So I wouldn't want to smash it up against the barrier or anything. I've thought about getting into the drift scene and the community for a long time. It's just a very expensive, like I said earlier, sport to get into because of the upkeep of the car and the events and tires and just everything that goes into it. It's just kind of astronomical. But I'm more, as I've gotten older, I'm for a while there, when I was 18 to probably 22, 23, I was really into the stance thing. I thought that was really cool and awesome. And I do that, and I did that. And now I'm kind of getting more into the speed part of things. Like I like speed. I like going fast. And that's kind of where my mindset is right now, is just speed and handling and agility. That's kind of what I'm into right now.
Yeah. Well, here, like people are, like more inclined towards the drift scene. Like people here on the local, like racetracks, they have their own, like Nissan Silvias and all. They, like on the weekends, they just drift, and like stances are, I think, almost non-existent here. Because, like
Really?
people, almost non-existent, like very few cars.
So
Like,
do
but the
do
drift
people get
community
looked
was on
at?
fire.
So do the people that have stance cars, do they get looked at kind of weird because they have stance cars, or is it just kind of, they don't really have a group to fit into?
No, like it's a small group, but like it's relatively small to the larger ones. For example, if
Right. Oh yeah,
like,
that's fair. Yeah, I
if you just
understand.
call up the drifters, like 15 guys will show up in an hour. But like if you call up the stance guys, maybe 3 or 4, maybe.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. And that's the stark contrast, because here you'd call up the drift guys, a couple thousand to show up. You call up the stance guys, a couple thousand will show up. So it's really it's very interesting to see that that dynamic, especially in your country. That's interesting to know that.
Yeah. Now, so Sean, what's the story behind you being so much enthusiastic about Volkswagen?
Let's see. So when I got my Volkswagen, my GTI, and Ryan got his Lancer. Because yeah, so Ryan had his Lancer and I had my GTI. Had a 1.8T, was nice and turboed. You hit that spool, it felt amazing. And it didn't. I don't think it really actually hit me how much in love I was with Volkswagens until after I got rid of that GTI. Because I became so natural in everything I did with that Volkswagen that I didn't even think about it.
Take it for granted.
Yeah, you kind of take it for granted. And so finally the head gasket gave out and it gave out and I ended up having to sell it and kind of move on to cut my losses with it. And after that, I mean, I went through a 2003 Mitsubishi Lancer. I had a Supra, a Mark III Supra for a couple weeks. And then I also had an Audi that I had for a couple months. Those all had issues that caused me not to keep them for very long. But that's a different story entirely. But having like the Lancer and the Supra, when I was in them, it just didn't feel the same. Because the GTI was manual, my Lancer was manual. It was something I always had with my cars. I became I had this love for manual instead of an automatic. And I won't give any such cheesy answers. I liked being one with my car or whatever. But when I had the Lancer, just shifting it did not feel right. When I had the Supra, shifting it just did not feel the same. Just the handling of everything, it felt like something I didn't want to own. And then I got the Audi and had another 1.8T in it. And I started driving that and I realized something kind of clicked in me. Like I really enjoy what Volkswagen offers, the handling, the feel when you're sitting inside of it, and just the overall experience of having a Volkswagen. Unfortunately, the Audi finally gave up on me with an electrical issue. And so I was finally out another Volkswagen. And I finally, due to my love, had to get a 2014 Volkswagen Jetta and once again, get that Volkswagen experience back. So that's really what that's really my Volkswagen experience that I can give right there. But yeah.
Great, man.